And welcome Ryan Rowe.
Thank you, guys. So, when I was in fourth grade, that was when we as students were allowed to start taking music lessons in school. And we could all pick an instrument, and then we'd start taking lessons. I chose to play the trombone for two reasons. The first one was that I knew this girl named Jessica who was going to play the saxophone, and I heard that the saxophone players and the trombone players took lessons together. And the reason I didn't play the saxophone like her is because the buttons scared me. So the second reason I chose to play trombone was because my dad was a phenomenal trombone player. He played for many years as a trombonist in the Marine Corps band. He traveled all over the country playing in all these different cities. He was based in New Orleans, and he got to play in a bunch of clubs there. And he also played at the Super Bowl a few times. So he's very, very good at trombone. So I thought, if I decide to play the trombone, he can kind of help me out a little bit. So I start taking lessons, and there's only two trombone players in the whole school. There's me and a fifth grader named Gina. And after a few months of taking lessons, I'm terrible at the trombone. And trombone, it's a really hard instrument, especially for a fourth grader, because you have these little fourth grade arms, and you can't reach long enough to hit a C note, you know? But the good thing was that Gina was also terrible. So we were terrible together, and that's what mattered. That's what felt good to me. Until 2 weeks before our first winter concert, Gina decides to quit. Yeah, she just up and leaves me as now the only trombone player in the whole school, and again, I'm awful at it. And our band teacher, Mrs. Pettigrew, is worried. So a week before our concert, they have a parent-teacher conference, and my dad comes in, and he meets Mrs. Pettigrew, and he mentions that he played the trombone. And she goes, "Wait, would you like to play in our winter concert with the fourth graders?" And he's hesitant about it. He's like, no, this is their thing. I don't want to take anything away from them. And she goes, "Please, will you play in our concert with us?" So he reluctantly accepts. And I'm a fourth grader. I'm embarrassed by this. I don't want to be sitting in the front row with Jessica on my right and an adult man on my left. And I'm really nervous about this because I know I'm going to be terrible and he's going to be great, and it's going to be a whole thing. So the concert comes around, and we start playing the first song, and my dad and I are sitting in the front row, and we're immediately playing a game where we're competing to see who can play the quietest. I'm playing quiet because I don't want people to hear the noises coming out of my trombone. And my dad is playing quiet because he doesn't want to upstage a bunch of 9-year-olds. We're both playing very, very quietly, so much so that Mrs. Pettigrew, while she's conducting, is going, "Get louder now," to us in the front row. The second and third song, they go a little bit better. I'm getting a little more comfortable. I'm not as nervous. And then the fourth song we play, the last song we play, is "What a Wonderful World" by Louis Armstrong. And you guys know, it's such a slow and beautiful song, and it's not that hard to play on a trombone for a fourth grader. And I was really happy in that moment. It was so much fun for me to just sit there and be present, and as I'm playing, I'm just listening to my dad playing, and he's so good at it. Every note he's hitting perfectly, and it's so smooth, and it's just a slow, beautiful song to end on. And in that moment, I was really happy to be playing next to my dad. All of the embarrassment that I had, all of the nervousness that I had just melted away in seconds. And I was really, truly happy in that moment. And he ended up playing in every concert we did for the next 5 years. We had a total of 0 new trombone players every year for 5 years. I was the only person And my dad got to sit next to me at every concert. And it was awesome. I loved it. Every time, I was never embarrassed about it. I always looked forward to it. It was a really, really special moment for us each time. So much so that when I eventually got to high school, there were some upperclassmen that were playing trombone, so I was no longer the only one, and my dad didn't need to play with us anymore. So I only ended up playing one more semester before I decided to quit, because it didn't feel as fun anymore. Something felt missing. And I didn't want to go forward doing it, not being able to play with him anymore. Fast forward to now, a few months ago, I was taking a road trip through the South, and I spent a whole day in New Orleans. And it was really special. New Orleans is such a cool city. I highly recommend visiting it. And it was really special to me because I spent a whole day there just walking around and looking at all the buildings and thinking, this is where my dad lived when he was my age, And the last thing I did in New Orleans was I visited a place called Preservation Hall. It's this small, old, hole-in-the-wall club where these old guys play Dixieland jazz, and they're the most phenomenal musicians you'll hear in New Orleans. The trombone player was especially great, and they played all these songs, and we're all having a great time, and then right before they end the concert, a guy from the back of the room comes up and hands the lead man a $5 bill and asks him to play Louis Armstrong's What a Wonderful World. And so they play this song, and it's slow, and it's beautiful, and I'm sitting right in front of the trombone player, and he's hitting every note perfectly, and it's so smooth, and I'm overwhelmed with emotion. I start crying halfway through the song because in that moment, I was transported back into being fourth grade Ryan, where I was so thankful to have had those moments where I got to play with my dad. And when I got back home, I immediately went to our attic, and I found that we had kept my trombone this whole time. And so I opened up the case, and I smelled the brass again for the first time in years. It's such a sweet smell. And I put the bell and the slide together, and you can hear just all the familiar sounds. And I start playing, and immediately I'm reminded of how terrible I was. But now I don't care anymore, because I'm no longer listening to myself. I'm just listening to the memory of playing with my dad. So thank you, guys.